the point is, listen. Let's just try and analyse what the components of the sounds of our soundscape are. Murray Schafer has this term sound mark, which again is a significant kind of architectural phenomenon. We have sound marks in Edinburgh, for example, the 1 o'clock gun goes off every day at 1 o'clock. This is a reliable, iconic, just like a sculpture, iconic element of the city's fabric, but it's manifested in sound rather than through some object. What other ways could we describe the soundscape? Well, there are background elements that I kind of mentioned before, and foreground elements, and repeating patterns, spontaneous one-off events, living things, machines. These are not organised in any particular categorisation system. They're just a list of ways you might, features you might distinguish. This background-foreground thing is a really important part of your listening activity. The background and foreground changes all the time. What might be background for one person might be foreground for another. In this room, for example, there will be some of you for whom my voice is background, and for others, foreground. As I say, I'm constantly being niggled by the sound of this projector. It's eating away on my right channel here. But I'm also aware of other things. I'm aware of outside. And you're all aware of outside as well, but your brain has decided to not worry about it. But you can still put these things in sort of, your brain still indexes them. So you can hear that there's a machine outside right now. Probably cars. I can see that there's a possibly not in fact. You can't see that, but you've indexed the sound as being part of the transport index. You put it over there as a mechanised vehicle that's moving in space. And that's where it is. And then you might use your eyes and look and confirm, oh, there it is, and it becomes foreground for a second. And when you look at it, you hear it. One of the things that people do who work with soundscape all the time, who do creative work with soundscape, and people who go to music concerts or go to experience sound works, they try to privilege sound over the other senses. And I think it might be rather fun just to try and do that now. I'm going to shut up for a minute and let's just listen. Try and really listen. What did you hear? Straight into the foreground, yeah, as soon as my voice disappeared.
The beeping of electric bus. Lots of cars.
You hear the brakes going on in cars.
Brakes of the cars. So not just cars, but certain features of them that they might be stopping and starting. Anything else? Sort of fun thing in the building as well. Not very clear. Something else outside this room.
I was surprised there wasn't many more coughs because it's week 5 now. Freshers flu's over, so I expected to hear humans, but
now this is something that happens when you really listen. You can't cough. You don't cough. You don't sneeze. You You don't need to blow your nose. It's true. And I know this as a musician. I know when the audience is really listening to me because they stop coughing. And I know when they've stopped listening to me because they start coughing again. It's really true. If you've got a cough but you're really listening, you don't need to cough.
The cure.
Yeah.
Cure for the common cold.
Just sit down and listen and it sort you out. Trouble is eventually you have to stop listening or someone breaks your concentration and then you start coughing. But when you're concentrating only on listening, your body doesn't need to do anything else. I started to zoom in on the sort of frequency components of the fan, honing in on the fact that it's not just one sound, but composite of several. That fan is the fan spinning around, but there's a high frequency part, a mid frequency part, and if we got my ear really close, there'd be a low frequency part where you hear the air flapping. There are at least 2 or 3 pitches in the very high end, and more things there. So when you start to sort of unpick it, when you start to peel away and start to focus in on the soundscape, you start to see, you start to hear a wealth of stuff, a wealth of information, a wealth of stuff to use, a wealth of stuff to work with. We'll hopefully come on to that a little bit. Here are some of Luigi Russollo's responses to his soundscape. He built these intono remori, these noise-making instruments that emulated the sounds of his environment. And he made literally instruments so that he could write music for them. So he's got the sounds of people whirring and scraping and scratching, and he also had orchestras playing waltzes, and he'd scratch and scrape and make this horrible racket over the top of them. I've got some recordings, I won't play them unless you ask me to at the end. But part of his point is to smear the filth of modern man over the top of the very staid and stuck in the model orchestral situation that he's in. He's trying to be a revolutionary, he's trying to be a futurist. He also, you can't read that, can you? He tries to make a categorization of all the things that are in the sound environment around him so that he can write music with them. And this is important for digital work as well. We're always faced with this thing of having to categorize things, put them in a box, put them in a place so that we can use them later. So, there's a list of things there. You can read them another time. Schaefer, on the other hand, categorizes the soundscape broadly into two halves, the hi-fi soundscape and the lo-fi soundscape. Hi-fi soundscape is what we might think of as the rural, non-mechanized soundscape, the countryside, the soundscape pre the Industrial Revolution. Why is it hi-fi? Well, it's hi-fi, just meaning high fidelity, because you can hear all the elements very clearly, crisply. There's not a broadband noise floor in the background swallowing up all of the details that are available to you. In the city, particularly, we have the absolute opposite, according to Schaefer, a lo-fi soundscape, where this broadband noise of essentially the automobile, the motor car, factories and so on, creates if I talk about the noise floor, you might see the countryside noise floor being kind of down here, and you've got the sound of wind and grasses and things like that, and might be around sort of 30 or 40 decibels. You come up to the city, and you've got something like a noise floor of about 80 decibels to 85 decibels when you're standing on the street. Now that's not doubling.